This video is on behavior problems and how to respond. The purpose of this video is just to kind of give you an overview about our way of looking at challenging behaviors and give you some general strategies that you could utilize to decrease challenging behaviors. So there are four main functions of behavior. There's attention, tangible, escape, and automatic. So I'm going to kind of just talk through what those look like, and for each of those just kind of provide some general strategies that we would typically use. So most times, in order to determine what the function is, we would take behavior data to look at what's triggering the behavior and also the consequence. So there's always something that's going to be maintaining the behavior. So we're kind of looking and analyzing what that is, and based on the function dictates our interventions. So I'm going to put the disclaimer in here that it's very, very important that before we're implementing any of these procedures that we make sure that we know what the function is. And if you need some guidance on facilitating that, please feel free to reach out to me for additional questions and support. So the first function is attention. It's exactly like it sounds. A child is engaging in a challenging behavior to seek attention from somebody. The attention can be from an adult, a peer. It just kind of depends on the situation. So in all of these scenarios, the child is looking to seek something. And in this scenario, they're looking to seek attention. So typical scenario of what this entails is mom's on the phone with her friend and the kid really wants a snack, but the parent isn't paying attention to them. They may come up and start hitting their parent, and the parent responds by turning around and saying, "What do you need?" So that is a child's way of inappropriately, but getting the parent's attention. So that's an example of how that would pan out. And some things that we would do instead are teaching appropriate ways to gain an adult's attention. So an example would be tapping their parent on the shoulder, or teaching them to say mama if they wanted access to mom's attention, or exchanging a picture to indicate that they want something to where the parent doesn't have to intervene and attend to the challenging behavior by providing attention. And with that too, so we call that a replacement behavior. But the important piece is that we are also withholding reinforcement of what's maintaining the behavior. So in that scenario, attention is maintaining the behavior. So we would be looking to eliminate attention provided contingent on the challenging behavior. So in that scenario, parent is on the phone, child kicks and screams because they want a snack, we wouldn't attend to the kicking and screaming. So instead, we would not respond to that, and we would prompt the appropriate replacement behavior. So prompt them to tap you on the shoulder and then provide attention. So what do you need? And then give them access to the attention contingent on them engaging in the appropriate response. The next function of behavior is tangible. So this is when an item that's preferred is delivered contingent on a challenging behavior. So for example, you're at the grocery store and your child is flopping to the floor to indicate that they want candy. And reinforcement would be if you buy the candy despite their challenging behavior that's occurring. Very, very common, obviously. In the moment, we see an immediate decrease of the behavior because buying the candy directly stops the behavior from occurring in the moment. But in the future, it increases the behavior because next time you go to the store, the child's more likely to kick and scream at the store because they want access to candy. So with that being said, some things that we would teach are appropriate expectations, and appropriate communication to ask for the item. So in that scenario, we would likely teach the child to appropriately say, "Candy, please," and provide access to the candy based on the appropriate communication response. When that happens, obviously, I know there's times that we want to get to a point where we're not reinforcing every time your child asks for candy, but then we would work on like fading out access to reinforcement and working on tolerance. So that would come later, but typically we would start by teaching the communication response. And then kind of like the last one, like attention. One of the main things is not only the replacement communication response, but also to withhold access to what's maintaining the behavior. And in this scenario, it is the access to the preferred item. So in a scenario where your child engages in a tantrum at the grocery store because they want candy, we would not provide access to that reinforcement. So you would have to follow through with, the demand that was present. So if you said that you can't have candy, it's now, the consequence that we want to provide is making sure that we're following through with that response that we gave them. So this one I want to point out too, that I know that's a challenge for sure. And I think that kind of like I said with the attention piece, in order to actually be able to decrease the future likelihood of this behavior occurring, you have to have 100% buy-in to follow through with the instructions that you're providing, or else you're not going to be successful with it. Because if you're not going to be able to implement the appropriate consequences, then the expectations are a little blurry for your child. So we want to make sure that we're on the same page with all of those things as well. The next one is escape from a demand. This is also very common, as you can imagine. So this happens directly following a demand that has been placed. So if I said, tie your shoes, and your child fell to the floor and cried, then I think it would be safe to say that it was directly related to the demand that I presented. So some things that we would do in this scenario are providing, again, like a communication response of no thank you, or I don't want to do that, or help me please. That helps with, a task that's very difficult for a child. So gives them the appropriate communication skills they need to remove the demand from occurring. And then along with that, in order to reduce the behavior too, looking at making sure to follow through with the demand. Again, so we're not honoring that we said tie shoes, you flop to the floor, and then you don't have to tie your shoes anymore. That just teaches the child that you don't have to follow through with the demands that were presented. And it increases the likelihood that the behavior is going to happen again in the future. So by teaching the appropriate communication response skills, we're teaching the skills they need to either remove the challenging situation, or we're following through. So the child's challenging behavior isn't interfering with that at all. Some other things that you can consider here are asking for a break. One of those things that, again, if you have a really challenging academic task that you're presenting, again, the follow-through piece is so important. But if you're noticing that the task difficulty is just too hard, provide an expectation of what you're looking to get out of it and make sure to follow through with that. So, if you had intended on a 15-minute task and after minute 1, your kid is just done with it, kind of provided a different guideline, and it's okay to do that. So like, all right, let's do 2 more minutes and then you can be all done. Let's take a break, and then teach them to say break, and then give them the opportunity to have a break for a short time. So things like that are going to set you and your child up for success, because I mean, the way I view it is if your child is very, very resistant, that shows that we need to modify teaching on our end somehow, and maybe that means simplifying it or teaching in a different way that the child's going to be more successful with. And then last but not least is our automatic function. This is probably the most challenging to reduce. And automatically reinforced behavior is something that happens with nobody or anything that are providing reinforcers. So I'm not delivering anything, I'm not removing anything. It's things that are reinforcing to a child without any other variables. So you may have heard the term self-stimulatory behavior. And this is something that it's one of the characteristics of autism. So a child might throw items in the air because they like the sight, or they might be scripting lines from a movie because they find a lot of value in doing so. Or they may make some type of vocalization because they like the noise that it makes on their ears. The challenge with this one is we don't necessarily know what the child is getting out of it. So one thing that we would typically do is, really talk to the parent about whether or not it's something that they even want to intervene on. Typically, we really don't, unless it's interfering with their ability to learn, like it's very, very high frequency or something like that. There's a lot of research out there, mostly from people with autism, who say that they need to do that to get it out of their system. And for us, like, we want to respect that and honor it. And if they need some time to flap their hands for a little while, that's totally okay. However, if it's something, like I said, that's really interfering or is maybe like self-injurious, that's something that we would focus on. Obviously, we don't want a child to regularly harm themselves either. So we would typically provide a replacement behavior. And basically, like I said, it's tough because we don't necessarily know what type of value they're getting out of engaging in the self-stimulatory behavior. But an example might be, if a child is spitting, we might redirect spitting to happen in the sink or in the toilet. If the child is continuously throwing hard items in the air, we might give them a ball to throw in a basket. So kind of looking at something that's fairly similar in terms of like the response that the child has to engage in, and replacing it with something that's a little bit more appropriate and obviously not dangerous as well. That's typically it. Like I said, in terms of the biggest take-home points that I have are to really look at what is the actual function. So why do we think the behavior is happening? Coming up with a replacement behavior. So like I said, it's usually some type of communication response. And then also following through with whatever it is that is maintaining the behavior. So in our scenarios with attention, we wouldn't provide attention when the behavior happens. For escape, we would make sure that we follow through with the demand to ensure that the child isn't escaping the task based on the challenging behavior. For tangible, we want to make sure that we're not delivering the item. And for automatic, we don't have to necessarily block it, but teaching appropriate times to engage in that behavior, or teaching that appropriate replacement response contingent on that behavior. And that's it for functions of behavior. Thanks, guys.